Upon hearing that all of them had passed, they collapsed on the ground as a few of them cried tears of joy. Seeing this, Shiro chuckled as she waved her hand and summoned a tablet. I'll give you lot an accommodation for the day, and we'll be setting off early in the morning once you have rested up well. We'll be teleporting near the rough location of Varish, Lyre, and continue the remaining journey manually. If there is anything you want to do before you leave for a few days, you might want to do it now, Shiro said as a few of them nodded at each other. Your Highness, one of them called out as Shiro glanced over. Emin, what is it? She recognized him as the one in charge of the formation when the three of them joined hands to endure the attack. I know this might sound like a lot, but can you have a look at our older brother? His condition is a little unique, and we haven't been able to do anything about it. We've had a request for the Healers Guild, but it was not their expertise. He asked as Shiro raised her eyebrow before nodding her head. All right, I can have a look at him now. What kind of injury is it? Shiro asked curiously since there wasn't much that Sylvia couldn't handle. For her to say that it wasn't their expertise, this injury must be quite hard to treat. The problem is that we don't know. Miss Sylvia had a look at our brother, and she said that she couldn't determine the cause, so it was hard to treat. Hence why it probably wasn't within her expertise. He replied as Shiro crossed her arms and furrowed her brows. All right, show me the way. I'll see what I can do. Shiro nodded. Glancing back, Shiro was about to ask Nantian to show the others to their accommodation when she thought about how long this might take. Nantian, have someone escort them to their rooms. Are you able to come with me? Of course I can. Nantian nodded with a smile, since that was what he was planning anyways. Waiting for a moment, a few servants arrived as Nantian instructed them on what to do. Seeing the people leave, Shiro turned to the three. If you will. She smiled and gestured for them to lead the way. As they were walking, Shiro brought up their information and had a look. All three of them were orphans, and the one being registered with them was also an orphan, but it seems like he was acting as a guardian before succumbing to the injury. The current leader of the three was called Nathan. He was a tall youth that had short brown hair and brown eyes. He seemed slim, but most of his physique was hidden behind his cloak. The second oldest was called Ural, and he seemed to be a half-elf. Similar to Lyrica, he had blonde hair and green eyes, but his ears were shorter than most elves, hence why Shiro figured that he was probably a half. The most up-to-date novels are published on lightnovelworld.com. The youngest of the three is Grandal. Like Nathan, he had brown hair and black eyes, but he was shorter than the other two. He was just slightly above Shiro's height, and his aura was more reserved than his brother's. Seems like you four have quite the nice relationship. Shiro smiled after going through all of their information. After coming to this city, the three of them have worked hard to find a treatment for their older brother, but they haven't found anything useful just yet. Even with all of the healers and mages around, they haven't been able to determine the cause of their brother's illness. Big brother has been looking after us ever since we were little. It didn't matter what happened, but he was always there, so we have to help him back. Nathan nodded as Shiro smiled. Following them to the residential district, quite a few of the residents were surprised at Shiro's sudden appearance and greeted her. Greeting them back, Shiro kept a smile on her face while occasionally grabbing onto Nantian without anyone knowing so that she could calm her nerves a little. There were moments where doubts would fester in her heart. Is there someone here that means harm? But knowing that it was just her paranoia, Shiro dismissed the thought. Walking through the streets, they eventually reached a detached house a little far away from the city center. Scanning his keycard, Nathan walked in first. Brother, I'm home, he called out, taking his shoes off and putting on the shoe rack. Pulling out some slippers, he offered it to Shiro and Nantian. Doing the same, Shiro put her boots to the side before putting on some slippers. I'll prepare some drinks. What do you like to drink, Your Highness? Grandal asked as Shiro smiled. I'll take juice then. Understood. What about you, sir? I'll take the same. Nantian nodded as Nathan led the two of them upstairs. This is brother's room. He's just inside, Nathan said as he opened the door. Turning on the lights, he stepped aside so that Shiro could see him for herself. The moment she entered the room, Shiro was hit with an overwhelming sense of miasma, as she couldn't help but frown. Walking up to the bed, she could see a pale-faced youth that looked like he was sleeping without any trouble. Drawing a rune on his chest, Shiro did a quick scan of his body and furrowed her brows. No wonder Sylvia couldn't determine the cause. Everything seems normal, and the miasma seemed to originate from thin air. Shiro thought with a frown as she activated analysis along with her mana sense to see if she could sense whatever was wrong with the man's body, but again, the diagnosis was that he was completely healthy. Is it something to do with the soul? She wondered. Closing her eyes, Black mist started to creep into the room as the shadows wrapped around her body and turned into a black dress. Activating her true spirit nature, Shiro opened her eyes and gently tapped his head. Suddenly, a faint figure of the man appeared in front of them as Shiro couldn't see anything that was wrong with him. Strange, too strange. There's definitely miasma, so why is he not harmed? Shiro furrowed her brows. Reaching beside her, a small portal opened as Shiro dragged out a lantern. Holy F***, CK the light of day, room? Whatever you finally dragged me out. I thought I was forgotten and lost to the void for a moment then. I've already finished with the dumbass you sent me last time, and there's no entertainment in here. The ancient terror complained immediately, as Shiro already had the urge to throw him back into the void. I'll give you some entertainment for your prison later. Before that, can you have a look at this man for me? His soul isn't injured, nor is his body injured, yet there's miasma. Shiro asked as the ancient terror paused for a second before opening his mouth. No idea, but it stinks of gods to me. Maybe the lad behind you can tell you more about it. His eyes are special after all. The ancient terror shrugged as Shiro raised her eyebrows and glanced back. I can certainly try. Nantion nodded his head, activating his skill after not using it for a long time. Nantion had to get used to the sensation again, as a tiny magic circle could be seen in his pupils. Looking at his eyes, Shiro couldn't help but think that they're akin to tiny jewels with the faint flickering of light. As for Nantion, the moment he activated his eyes, he immediately spotted what was wrong. There was a crest in the center of the man's soul. Recognizing it to be similar to the crest that Hemera was using, he knew that it was divine energy. There's a god crest on the young man's soul. A god is probably preparing to do something with this person. I'm guessing that it's an evil god with the miasma, and if we want to get rid of it, the best choice would be to get rid of the crest. Nantion replied as he furrowed his brows. A god crest? What does it look like? Shiro asked curiously as Nantion started to draw it out, while Shiro placed the soul back into the man's body and dismissed her true spirit nature. It looks like this. Receiving the tablet, Shiro looked at what he had drawn and furrowed her brows. The crest was that of a raven skull with a sword stabbed through the middle. Beside the skull were two torches that burned with a dark purple flame. Checking through her knowledge of god crests, Shiro could find a single match or record on what it might be linked to. I've seen that crest before. Nathan called out in surprise as both Shiro and Nantion looked towards him. You have? Yes. It was on an amulet that the nun carried on her at all times. Yes. It was in an amulet that the nun carried on her at all times. Hearing this, Shiro paused in surprise since not many gods could interfere with the world before the new age, much less bestow their crest to someone. Can you tell me more about this nun? Shiro asked as Nathan nodded his head. But are you able to tell me about what's happening to my brother? Nathan asked since his main concern was still his brother. We can tell you what we know and that a god is thinking of doing something to him. We're not sure about what, but it doesn't seem to be a good god. I could be wrong, however, but I can't just ignore the miasma being radiated from him. Shiro sighed as Nathan clenched his fists. Is there a way to save him then? There is. We have to get rid of the crest on his soul. Once we do that, the god's influence should end. But I'm not too sure since the capabilities of gods is beyond me right now. Shiro shook her head as Nathan sighed. All right. Thank you for letting me know. I'll tell you about the nun once we get downstairs. Leaving the room with Shiro and Nantion, Nathan closed the door behind him as he glanced towards his brother before sighing softly. Sitting in the lounge with Nantion, Shiro listened to Nathan talk about the nun that ran the orphanage. To them, she was always kind. Whatever they wanted, she would try her best to get for them. It was hard to keep the orphanage running by herself. Their village never had anyone strong enough to fend off the monsters properly, so they had to sacrifice parts of their village every time. With resources already low, keeping everyone fed was hard, but she tried her best. They did ask about the amulet when they were younger, but she only replied that this was a gift from someone who had given her a second chance at life. A second chance at life, huh? And you said that she unfortunately passed away during the attack when the new age started, right? Amen. We managed to escape thanks to brother, but she was killed by the monsters. Nathan nodded his head and sighed. Hearing this, Shiro leaned back for a moment. A person who gave her a second chance at life. I'm not sure what kind of god this is, but I should probably find a way to delay things a little. I can't slow down time in a person's body just yet, so that's off the table. Shiro thought to herself. I don't think we can help your brother just yet, Shiro said as she could see their eyes flicker with sadness. However, there's a chance that you might find something you need from the country of Varishlyre. Depending on what happens, I might be able to help as well. Shiro smiled. Upon hearing this, their eyes brightened as Nathan nodded his head. All right, we'll try to learn as much as we can from the country. Are you able to tell us any specific areas of study that we need to learn in order to help our brother? Nathan asked curiously. Something to do with the soul, removing crests and divine energy. That is probably what you want to find out, but don't worry, I can search for that myself. Just work towards being good healers and help this city out. Shiro smiled as they nodded their heads. Talking to them for a little longer, both Shiro and Nantian left the house as they made their way back to the tower. Are you going to overwrite his crest with your own crest? Nantian asked curiously as Shiro nodded her head. Yup, I don't know how to remove crests, but I do know that I can achieve a similar effect should I replace it with my own. There are some added benefits too, but since he probably won't be on the front lines, these benefits won't matter too much. Shiro shrugged. True, I'm more concerned about the god. If they are able to bestow a crest, then there's no doubt that they're powerful. I'll do some research and see if I can find any gods that might potentially have a connection to ravens. Nantian replied. MN, speaking of gods, I'm curious about how this guy knew that your eyes could see through it. Shiro narrowed her eyes and pulled out the lantern with the ancient terror imprisoned within. I'll only speak if you give me some more entertainment. Sure, I'll send you to a different dimension instead and have a TV there so that you can watch programs every day. Shiro smiled. Deal. What do you want to know? How you knew about Nantian's eyes? Shiro asked as the ancient terror glanced towards Nantian. Well, where have you seen a person with golden eyes that have their own magic circle? I've only seen it once, and that was Odin's all-seeing eye behind that eye patch of his. This is weaker, but at least the lad has both eyes. The ancient terror smirked as Shiro raised her eyebrow. So you're saying that Nantian's eyes are almost equivalent to Odin's all-seeing eye? Yup, though all-seeing is a little bit of an exaggeration. Do you think it's Odin that might have put the crest on the young man? He has a link to ravens after all. Shiro asked, but the ancient terror shook his head. Nope, that old man's crest is something else. Even I haven't seen the raven crest before, so I can't help you with that. All I know is that once that lad gets some divine energy in his body, his eyes will be able to see a lot more. Now then, let's talk about my TV. You can watch cartoons all day. Shiro smirked as she threw the lantern into a separate dimension and summoned a TV that played the cartoons that children watch. Closing the portal before he could even protest, Shiro made her way back to the tower with a smile. How cruel. Nantian chuckled. Well, that's true, but don't worry. If he figures out how to change channels using the buttons, then he's fine. Shiro grinned. That, and I kinda just want to bully him a little for all the things he's done. Shiro shrugged. That's true. He is helpful though. His knowledge and interaction with gods are handy. Nantian agreed. Yup, hence why I still keep him around. Honestly, that, and the fact that I can't kill this mother asterisk cur. Too tenacious, so I might as well make use of him. Shiro shrugged. She had tried to kill his soul before, but it was tough. As in, it's hard to even make a dent in it, so the most she could do is keep it in her lantern for now. Once they were back in the tower, they returned to Shiro's room while she drank a potion and created 2 drones that have been fitted with the best gear she could provide. Both of them could travel as fast as her jet, and their main job was to set down teleport nodes near Varish Lyre. She also made sure that they were self-sufficient so that she didn't need to constantly funnel mana to them, while also allowing her to control them. Let's see, the route should be fine. If one of them breaks, I can use the second one as a marker to make more. Shiro muttered. The most up-to-date novels are published on lightnovelworld.com. Walking to the window, she set the 2 off and watched them fly towards the direction of Varish Lyre. Bringing out a pair of glasses, she put them on and saw everything the drones saw. Perfect. A remote control so that I don't have to worry about not being able to see what they see when I don't have mana. Shiro smiled before laying on the bed. I just had a thought, but if you keep drinking potions, wouldn't your mana realm evolve faster? Nantian asked, curious. I thought of that too, but I think it's more to do with divine energy, I think. As you know, divine energy is many times more powerful than mana, and I only produce so much per day. When divine energy runs out, it takes mana instead, so I'm waiting on my divine energy rather than mana. Shiro explained as Nantian nodded his head. Talking for a little longer, the 2 of them went to sleep while the drones made their way to the borders of Varish Lyre. ####. Waking up early in the morning, Shiro put on the glasses and checked the camera feed from the drones. Seeing the wall of mist in the distance, Shiro narrowed her eyes and smiled. Drinking a mana potion, she had the drones place down teleport nodes as everything is prepared. With Nantian also waking up, the The two of them sent a notification to the 24 that were selected for this trip. Waiting in the main plaza, Shiro could see a few people arriving as some were earlier than others. Sylvia and her group were the first to arrive as they waited by the side for everyone else. Looking at their expressions, Shiro couldn't help but chuckle. Seems like a few of you didn't get enough sleep last night. Excited about today? Shiro asked as a few of them scratched their heads in embarrassment. This is something similar to a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for us, Your Highness. It'll be stranger if we weren't excited. One of the alchemists called out as others agreed. That is true, but even if you are excited, you should sleep. How else would you focus on the information that you can find in the city? Next time, just knock yourself out with a spell. Shiro shrugged with a smirk. Well, not all of them have a sleep spell, so it's rather hard for them to knock themselves out. Sylvia chuckled as Shiro shrugged. Then just whack yourself with a stick. But setting that aside, I believe that everyone should be ready. It doesn't seem like we're missing anyone, so I hope all of you have finished anything important you might need to do. She asked, sweeping her gaze across the crowd, and nodded after making sure that everyone was here, including the 24 that she had chosen from yesterday. Seeing all of them nod, Shiro turned around and drew a rune in the air. Several Tier 6 magic circles appeared as they lined up to form a path towards a nanotech gate. Step through this, and you should be at a cliff. In front of you will be the sea, and, in the distance, there will be the mist protecting the country. Shiro said as the portal opened in front of them. Single file now. Like when you were a kid, everyone line up, and let's go through. Shiro joked as they stepped through the portal. Nan-Tion and Sylvia were the last to enter as Shiro made sure to check that Acharya will be slowly making its way near the country as well in preparation for the event. Once the course was set, she stepped through as well before closing the portal behind them. Immediately, she could feel the wind brush against her as the smell of the sea assaulted her nose. With her senses being strong, it was nothing but a salty hell for her right now. Right then, everyone, I want you to vote on a mode of transport. We have two to choose from. Shiro clapped her hands with a smile. The first is through air and the second is by sea. Which one do you guys prefer? Those that want sea go to the left, and those that want sky go to the right. Hearing that flight was an option, Sylvia immediately walked to the left since she wasn't keen on traveling by air. Seeing that someone close to Shiro didn't hesitate to take the route by sea, they immediately knew that something was wrong with traveling by air. One by one, they chose to travel by sea. Pouting a little, Shiro sighed, but secretly she was smirking. Fufu, she gave them an easy way out, but the boat was a trap all along. Noticing a small flicker in Shiro's eyes, Sylvia felt a bad premonition in her heart, but she couldn't put a finger on where that feeling was stemming from. Furrowing her brows, she watched as Shiro walked to the edge of the cliff. Second question, do you want a big boat or a small one? Big to the point of being an aircraft carrier, small to the point of a fishing boat. Shiro asked as she turned around. We probably want something smaller so that we don't make ourselves a big target, no? Sylvia asked as Shiro nodded her head. All right, in that case then, I found a perfect one. Shiro grinned as drank a potion and clasped her hands together. Lightning flickered around her as nanobots surged forwards and started to meld together. Watching the nanobots fuse and turn into a brown color, Sylvia furrowed her brows for a moment before facepalming since she realized what kind of boat, or rather, ship it was. They were watching a pirate ship being created before their eyes as the sails attached themselves to the ship. Behind the ship, where the rudder should be, was a giant jet engine along with mounted rail cannons on the sides. Since it was being constructed in front of them, all of them could see the weapons being loaded into the body of the ship. There were 3 layers of cannons along with a giant main cannon at the front where the opening would split into 2 and reveal the giant weapon. There were lots of unfamiliar tech, but the ones that Sylvia recognized to be a weapon or a part of one was enough for her to sigh and sit down on a nearby boulder. They just needed a ride there, not go for war. Oh, don't worry. These cannons can double as propellers. Shiro smirked. Wait, what? Sylvia looked up to see Shiro's grin. #####. There was the faint sound of screaming as a pirate ship could be seen blasting towards Varish Lyre in the distance. All of the engines were roaring as Shiro sat at the front of the ship with a smile. Her white hair fluttered behind her as she was completely unaffected by the rocking of the ship along with the speed. However, those that were behind her were having the ride of their lives as many grabbed onto anything they could get their hands on. Thankfully for them, the trip was rather short due to how fast they were traveling. By the time Shiro started to slow down the ship, they were now practically in front of the mist. Right then, the rest of this is up to you, Nan-Tion. Shiro chuckled as Nantion nodded his head and closed his eyes. Opening them once more, he peered past the mist and could see the formation protecting the country. They had talked about this after they woke up, since the ancient terror mentioned that it was similar to Odin's all-seeing eye, and how formations never had too much of an effect on him most of the time. They did a small test before walking to the plaza, and Nantion could faintly see the barriers from the cliffs. So rather than brute forcing it, they were going to have Nantion navigate their way safely to the docks. Handing over the controls to the boat to Nantion, Shiro stepped back and watched with a smile while everyone had recovered thanks to Sylvia's spell. While they could have cast it themselves, Sylvia was already prepared to cast it the moment they stopped. Seems like all of you enjoyed that. Should we loop around and try it again? Shiro asked with a smile. Hearing this, they all immediately shook their heads, since that was just asking for torture. Shame. Well, setting that aside, we'll be entering the mist now. Nantion will be navigating us through. I'm not sure how long it will take, but hopefully not long. Shiro smiled as they all sighed in relief. Some of them even walked to the edge of the ship to try to look through the mist if they could. Seeing that everyone was so excited, Shiro chuckled. Shiro. Hearing Nantion call her name, Shiro glanced over. Emin, what is it? You know how the pictures in that book showed you the runes that gods use? Nantion asked as Shiro nodded her head. Yeah? What about them? I think I found some now. Walking over, she could see that he's been drawing out runes in his tablet while navigating through the mist. The layers of the formation occasionally line up to form these runes. I only recognized them since they were familiar to the ones that you showed me in the book. There are also some within the magic circles themselves. Making herself a tablet, Shiro synced it up to Nantion's as she could see everything he drew. Narrowing her eyes at the runes, Shiro pulled out the book and found the matching runes. Compared to the ones that the writer had found in the country, these ones seem more complete, as they had additional segments. I see. No wonder that rune couldn't be deciphered. It was incomplete. She probably needed to take more steps back before taking a picture. Shiro muttered quietly as the pieces of the puzzle started to fit together. Sitting down, she started to decipher the runes while Nantion tried his best to spot all of them hidden within the formation. After 40 minutes, the mist finally started to disperse as Nantion sighed in relief. We've arrived. Running towards the front of the ship, all of the people on board could see the docks in the distance as the natives seemed surprised by their appearance. Beyond the horizon was a single pillar of light that seemed to descend from the heavens. We're finally here, Sylvia muttered as she couldn't keep her eyes off of the distant lights. That was where they needed to go for more knowledge. Controlling the boat towards the docks, Shiro could see the residents of this port village waiting by the road, looking at them with curious eyes. Seeing that there was a gap, Shiro docked the ship before jumping over the side and landed on the wooden walkway. Greetings, my name is Ilithintra. I'm the village head of Port Wrath Tale. May I know who I'm speaking to right now? An old man asked as he walked up to Shiro. I'm Shiro, the leader of this expedition, and we were planning on making our way towards the center so that we may gather knowledge for our healers and alchemists. I take it that you understand the country of Varish Lyre is akin to a trove of knowledge for people of these professions. Shiro smiled as Ilithintra nodded his head. I do indeed. However, it is quite strange for you to travel through here by boat. Most would be coming here through land towards the east. Plus, they are usually in smaller parties rather than in a group like yours. Ilithintra smiled as he glanced behind her and saw the 30-plus people getting off the ship. Would you like to stay for the day and perhaps commence in some trade with our local wares? We are rather interested in the items from the outside world. He offered with a smile, but Shiro shook her head. I would love to, but unfortunately, we're working on limited time. We'll be making our way to the center immediately. Shiro smiled as she snapped her finger. Just as she did this, the boat disappeared as she returned the nanobots back to Manhwa. Seeing this, the village head and the other villages looked around in surprise as they started to discuss amongst themselves. Everyone, I'll give you 5 minutes to browse around if something does catch your eye, but we'll meet up outside the village. Shiro clapped as she gestured for the people to make their way through. Nantion glanced towards Shiro, but she only gave him a smile and gestured for him to go too. Walking past her, Sylvia leaned over and whispered into her ear. If you're going to fight, don't make too much of a mess, and maybe keep it down if you can. Some of the healers here might not be too appreciative of slaughter unless you give them some context. Don't worry, I know. Plus, it'll be a warning at most. Shiro nodded. Hearing this, Sylvia sighed in relief as she joined the rest of the group and left. Village head, if you don't mind, I would like a quick word. Shiro smiled as the village head nodded. Walking over, Shiro flexed her finger as nanotech wires spread out like a spider's web. Now then, everyone here should be marked by my wires. Why don't we have a nice short chat since I won't be around here for long? I saw your look towards our ship. Seems like you want to leave very much, don't you? Shiro smiled as the blatant greed from both him and the villagers was a little concerning since she didn't like slaughtering a village the moment she entered a new country, but if she had to, she didn't mind getting her hands dirty. Now don't make a sound. If I notice you or any villagers here make a move that might cause me to raise my suspicion, I'll have to cut a few throats if you understand what I mean. Feel free to nod since I've already sealed your voice. Shiro chuckled softly as the Illithintra immediately nodded his head with cold sweat dripping down his back. He didn't think the newcomers from the outside world would be this scary since they're just healers, alchemists, or druids. Perfect. I shall be on my way too now. There will be a great battle in a few days that will drag all of Varish Lyre through hell, so you might want to prepare for that. Who knows if this village becomes a zone that needs to be captured? Shiro smiled, waving her hand and retracting all of the nanotech wires. She had to get that warning of the way since their main goal was knowledge and not slaughter. Walking through the village, Shiro had her book out and saw both Sylvia and Nantion waiting by the side. You done? Sylvia asked as Shiro nodded. Yup, gave him a small warning. They shouldn't have any thoughts anymore unless they want us to take care of them. Shiro smiled. However, let's ignore them for now. I'm more interested if there are any runes in this place. The last one that I had just deciphered allowed me to store spells. So, if I drink a potion and store spells in the runes, I can use it without drinking another potion even if I run out of mana. Of course, the level of the spell varies on my proficiency, and right now I can only store 1 or 2 simple ones in the rune, but they're enough for now. Shiro's eyes flickered with excitement as she showed them her palm, where there was a faint, glowing rune. Right now I have nanotech wires and vehicle construction stored, so I should be fine without drinking a potion for a while, she said as she started to look around the place for anything that could possibly match up to become a rune. But since it was just a small port village, there was a slim chance of something like that happening, so she wasn't too bothered if she found nothing. It was just a shot in the dark after all. Her main goals were to find where the author of the book had taken these images so that she could find out the full rune rather than half of one. 5 minutes passed by shortly as the 3 of them made their way out to the front. Doing a head count once more, Shiro nodded her head after making sure that all 37 of them were still around. All right, since everyone's done, let's set off. Again, I'll give you 2 choices, flying or driving, Shiro asked with a smile. Thinking about it carefully, they figured that it was probably better if they chose the sky route since it might be less of a bumpy ride. However, since they weren't sure, they looked towards Sylvia for help. Don't look at me. It's not going to be fun regardless of what we pick. Look at that face, and you can already tell her sadistic intent is brewing. Sylvia rolled her eyes as she pointed at Shiro, who only smiled brightly and waved to all of them. For those that weren't familiar, they would think she's just waiting for their response, but those that were familiar would be able to recognize the look in her eyes as she stares at her victims. They knew that hundreds of ideas on how she could torment them without going over the line were brewing in her mind right now, with each second they spend on thinking about which one to pick. Eventually, they settled on flying since at most they'll be pressed against their seat. But the moment they chose this, Shiro's smile widened as they panicked and picked land. This, however, just caused her to smile more as she even started to chuckle. The 37 victims struggled and eventually picked 2 people to play rock, paper, scissors. If the left won, they go by air, the right one, they go by land. Neither of them wanted to win as they didn't want to take responsibility. When they tried to suggest walking or going there manually, Shiro shook her head and said it'll take too long. You better King win. The person on the right hissed as the left rolled his eyes. Right back at you. You've always beat me in rock, paper, scissors before. Don't like that change now. Yes, but my breakfast wasn't on the line. If I win, I swear to the goddess that if I vomit, it'll be on you. All right, stop complaining. Rock, paper, scissors. The moment someone shouted scissors, they both threw their hands down as they analyzed their past matches and tried to devise a strategy. Both of them picked rock as they sighed in relief. However, they noticed something to the side. A delicate hand that made the gesture of paper. I win, so we pick both. Shiro grinned as her eyes flickered with sadistic joy. Despite her joyful expression with light blushes on her cheeks, they felt like they were looking at the devil. Their collective faces paled. If one was to pass by this area, they would see the strange scene of an abnormally large monster truck propelling itself into the air in a flash before transforming into a jet, blasting itself towards the light in the distance, followed by the faint sound of screams. In a few short moments, the jet transformed itself back into a monster truck as it slammed against the ground, kicking up a cloud of dust. With this, they've arrived at the center of the country. Let's see. According to the map, we should be just outside the capital called Tenon. Shiro muttered as she flipped through the map. Is everyone ready to leave? Shiro asked as she turned around with a smile. In front of her was a crater where the monster truck should have been, and sat around the crater were the victims who were healed by Sylvia. While their physical nausea may have been healed, their mental strain was not. Hearing the collective groan of pain, Shiro couldn't help but laugh as she pulled out some refreshments for them, aka some juice. Well, I'll let you guys rest for a bit before we go. We managed to cut the trip short using both land and air. Shiro smiled while getting Nantion to help her pass the drinks around. While they were all recovering, Shiro stood on top of the hill and looked towards the city of Tenon. Beneath the light shining down from the sky was a temple of sorts that had the crest of a tree etched into the surface, while the rest of the city was built around this temple. The city itself was similar to current modern cities when it comes to technology, but compared to Asharia, it was far behind. There were no skyscrapers or tall landmarks, as the tallest thing here was the temple. Shiro remembered reading in the book that the author had mentioned the temple being a place of worship for the people here, so having anything taller than it would be blasphemous. After all, it was also known as the place to talk to the gods. Looking at the layout of the city, Shiro narrowed her eyes as she activated her rune and created a small drone. Sending it to the sky, she closed one of her eyes so that she could see through the drone's eyes. Is something wrong? Nantion asked as he noticed Shiro scouting out the city. I wouldn't say something is wrong. Rather, something is bugging me. Like you see the start of a pattern but can't find the rest. Shiro replied. She wanted a bird's eye view of the city so that she could guess what this feeling was. Watching the drone fly higher, Shiro glanced down towards the city and smiled. No wonder I felt that something was bugging me. Shiro chuckled as she dismissed the drone. This entire thing is a giant magic circle, and it seems to be representative of a Tier 812. Each of the layers of the magic circle is represented by the loops of the city. The road circling the temple is the cutoff point for each layer. With the temple in the center, the magic circle is looping around the temple. I'm guessing the runes the author found are runes that were meant to be in this magic circle. Shiro smiled as she printed off an image of the city so that Nantion could see what she meant. Looking at the image, Nantion raised his eyebrow in surprise. So you're saying that if we were to look for the runes around the city, we'll be able to fill out these layers? Yup, though some of the runes in the book are incomplete, so we'll have to check through all of them to make sure they're correct. This is a good chance for us too, since we can just relax and spend our time looking for runes while everyone else goes to the temple for the trial. Shiro smiled as Nantion nodded his head. Don't you want to enter too? Even though you're not a healer or cleric, you have plenty of healing skills now. Sylvia walked up as she had overheard their conversation. I mean, I do, but runes are more fun, I guess. Shiro scratched her cheek. You really like runes now, don't you? Sylvia raised her eyebrow as Shiro shrugged. Well, yeah, of course I do. I mean, with runes I can access the power of the gods early. Hearing this, Sylvia couldn't help but shake her head as Shiro was thinking about how to break the balance of power again. However, she was also happy about this since this was much better than what Shiro was doing before. Well, alright. See if you can partake the trial when you can, since it's still beneficial. Sylvia chuckled as Shiro nodded her head. Sure, I'll do it if I have time after looking over the runes. You seem knowledgeable about this country, so do you want to lead the others to the trail while me and Nantion find some runes? Shiro asked as Sylvia thought about it for a moment before glancing back. The moment she did, she was assaulted by the expectant stares, begging for her to lead them instead of Shiro. Sighing heavily, Sylvia facepalmed before turning towards Shiro. Alright, I'll do it. I'll contact you if anything happens. Perfect, Shiro smiled. Watching Sylvia lead them towards the temple, Shiro glanced over at Nantion. Shall we visit the outermost layer first? There are a few runes here that I couldn't decipher. There's a chance that the runes are incomplete like the ones that we saw in the mist, so I want to double check. Shiro asked as Nantion nodded his head. Sure. Do you also want to bring back some delicacies for Ian? Not many get to visit Varish Lyre after all. The cuisine here might be interesting for Ian. Nantion smiled as Shiro thought about it for a moment. That's true, alright. I'll buy some food for me too then. I'll be honest, I'm quite curious too. Shiro chuckled as the two of them made their way into the city. However, When they arrived, they realized that all of the buildings seemed to be empty. That's strange. Looking at the pictures the author took, there should be a bunch of people roaming around. Shiro furrowed her brows while flicking through the book. Let me call Sylvia. Bringing out her phone, Shiro gave Sylvia a call as she waited for her to pick up. Calling so soon? Did something happen? Sylvia's voice rang out. Yeah, why is there no one here? Shiro asked. I'll be honest, I have no idea either. This place should be filled with people right now, but I can't sense anyone. The road to the temple doesn't seem to be well maintained either. Sylvia replied with a frown. Should we continue to the temple, or should we meet up? She asked as Shiro thought about it for a moment before opening her mouth. Let's meet up. Since we don't know what's happened here, it's best that we stick together. Let's meet in front of the temple. I'll send some drones to scan the ruins for me since there's no one here, but while it's doing that, let's see if we can find any survivors or at least any remains of people being here. Shiro replied as she tapped her finger in the air. Suddenly, tens of drones appeared around her. Giving them the command, Shiro watched as they dispersed themselves to the rest of the city. All right, I'll meet you at the entrance of the temple. Hopefully we can still do the trial. Sylvia sighed deeply before ending the call. Walking through the city, towards the temple, Shiro glanced into the homes and saw dried-up food along with empty seats. It was as though things here were frozen in time, with the residents being removed from the pictures. This isn't exactly what I hoped to see when coming to this city. How long do you think this place has been left untouched? Nantian asked as he traced his finger along the walls and picked up a bunch of dust. It can't be long, considering news of this hasn't spread to the port village. But the evidence here suggests otherwise. Shiro frowned since some of the walls were threatening to crumble with the slightest touch. It's strange. Let's keep going. We don't want to keep dash. Before she could even finish her sentence, they both saw a cloud of dust erupt out in the distance. Noticing that it was towards the direction of the temple, they both dashed towards it without hesitation. A few moments ago, after ending the call with Shiro, Sylvia glanced around her and noticed something strange. Runes started to appear in the space around them as she felt a bad feeling in her heart. I swear, everywhere we go it's always combat after combat. We come to a nice country full of knowledge. No one's fucking here, and it's combat again. Get your King ass out, and let me get a good look at the dickweed that's trying to ruin my holiday. Sylvia gritted her teeth as a dark red aura flared around her. Activating all of her combat buffs on herself, she glanced around and locked onto the mana signal she could sense. Reaching out, she managed to grab the person's ankle and slammed them against the floor in front of her. Stomping down on their spine, she twisted her foot and snapped the spine in half, disabling them for good before grabbing the person by the back of their neck to see who it was. Arriving at the scene, Shiro was greeted with the image of Sylvia holding a bloodied figure up by the back of their neck. The 37 healers and alchemists stared at her in a mixture of shock, awe, and just overall disbelief that someone so calm and happy would turn into a berserker the moment combat started. Should I ask what happened? Shiro raised her eyebrow as Sylvia glanced over. Just found someone trying to ambush me while I was thinking about what happened. I've already given him some treatment, but he's going to be paralyzed. Sylvia replied with a sigh. Throwing the body in front of Shiro, the man laid on the ground with the whites of his eyes showing. Realizing that he must have passed out, Shiro massaged her eyes. Did anyone get injured? She asked as Sylvia shook her head. All right, I'll ask this guy's soul then. No point waking him up since his soul is dark gray. Shiro shrugged as she drank a potion before closing her eyes. Suddenly, black mist gathered around the corners of the city as it merged into a black dress for Shiro. Opening her eyes, she was about to drag the man's soul out when she widened her eyes and took a step back out of shock. What the? Shiro muttered in disbelief. What happened? Nantian asked as he immediately understood that this was abnormal. Without saying anything else, Shiro snapped her finger as black mist wrapped around everyone here. A green glow appeared on their eyes as they could now see souls like her. The moment they did, they all understood why Shiro was in complete disbelief. Floating in the sky were the shattered souls of the past residents. Each of them had a face of complete agony, as there wasn't a single intact soul. Even with her power, she would not be able to resurrect them properly without the person becoming a puppet. The sheer density of the souls blocked out the sky as no one could take their eyes off them. The souls were shattered fairly recently. If not, they would have dispersed by now. Judging by their state, I'd say it's been half a week since they've died. Shiro muttered after a short pause. Half a week? Isn't that when we got the notification for the event? Nantian frowned. Seems like someone has already been here. but this seems weird. Normally, when a person kills someone, their entire soul would disperse. All of this here is a deliberate attack to the soul. Whoever did this targeted their souls specifically. Shiro narrowed her eyes. However, this is what I'm confused about. It's like when a kid leaves behind food. Someone has targeted specific parts of their soul while leaving the rest behind as garbage. If a queen had done this, I do have a candidate in mind, but I doubt they'd leave behind leftovers like this. Hearing this, they all fell silent as Shiro eventually shook her head. I can try to piece together what has happened, but to do so, I would be using all of the souls here as fuel. Right now, if we leave them be, there's still a chance they could reincarnate, but it'll take a while. But if I was to use them as fuel to find out what happened, I'll be taking them out of reincarnation. Shiro admitted. Let's think about that later. For now, let's ask him about what he knows. Sylvia suggested as she gestured towards the man in front of Shiro. MN, nodding her head, Shiro summoned a chain into her hands before whipping it towards the unconscious man. Tugging on the whip, an illusionary figure appeared with chains wrapped around his body. Without saying anything, Shiro reached out with her spare hand and grabbed his head. A Tier 6 magic circle appeared around her wrist as runes spread from her arm to his body. All right, he should be in a state of forced obedience. Sylvia, if you have any questions for him yourself, you can ask away. Otherwise, I'll be asking some stuff myself, Shiro said as she glanced towards Sylvia. I do have a question or two. First, what were you doing here? Hearing this question, the man spasmed for a moment before opening his mouth. To monitor the trials and send news back the moment more people arrive. Send news back to WH-. You might not want to ask that just yet. There's a binding vow on his soul. The moment he mentions a specific keyword, he'll self-destruct. Shiro cut in as Sylvia furrowed her brows before nodding. All right, in that case, then why are you monitoring the trials? What's the person's goal in asking you to monitor the trials? To prevent the discovery of a secondary trial. The initial trial is to pass down knowledge, while the secondary trial is a treasure trove. This place has been influenced by a Tier 8 being. Why is the secondary trial a treasure trove? Shiro asked with a frown. We don't know, but we could sense an incredible amount of mana from the secondary trial, and there were theories about how the rewards must be incredible. Have you tried to enter the secondary trials? We weren't able to open it. However, I think that's about enough questioning. My dear subject can't be spilling too many secrets now, can he? He's already told you about the secondary trials, so let's count that as a freebie. A small meeting gift, I suppose. A voice rang out as Shiro immediately frowned. The voice was heavily distorted, so Shiro couldn't tell who it was. Before she could say anything, she felt the soul strain as it was about to break apart, but she only scoffed before drawing a rune on his chest. The moment she finished the rune, his soul stabilized. You used the runes belonging to the realm of gods. That certainly changes things a little. Thankfully, I have more ways than one when it comes to killing my subordinates. I wouldn't call this a first meeting, but it was a pleasure to meet you. I can't see your title, but I certainly sense the aura belonging to an empress rather than queen, albeit a little injured. I await your performance in the event to come, but don't worry, I won't be there. I am merely a spectator of the events. Farewell. I hope we can do business properly next time rather than extracting information like this. The voice laughed before disappearing. Furrowing her brows, Shiro glanced back at the soul in her hands before clicking her tongue. The soul's useless now. It's been wiped clean, Shiro frowned. Right now, the soul in her hands was completely white, untainted like a newborn soul. If she returned it to the body now, he wouldn't know any languages, nor would he know how to walk. Clicking her tongue, she removed the runes before allowing the soul to disperse so that it could reincarnate. Snapping her finger, she disposed of the body with her flames before sighing. Just as she was about to deactivate her true spirit nature, she saw a floating crest that was hiding amongst the dispersing light of the man's soul. Seeing the crest, her eyes widened since it was the same raven crest she had seen on the older brother. Was that the god involved with the triplets? The one who gave the nun a second chance? He's a spectator, but unlike other gods, he is able to talk without any trouble. Why is he allowed here before the second half? Shiro thought to herself, as that was probably a projection of his voice. But the fact that he seemed completely unfazed was strange, since there should be limitations to a god revealing themselves. What should we do now? Sylvia asked as Shiro glanced towards the temple. I think we should have a look at what this secondary trial is. Shiro replied as Sylvia nodded his head. What about these souls then? It seems like they're stuck in a stasis of sorts. Sylvia gestured towards the fragmented souls. Biting her lips, Shiro sighed. There's nothing we can do other than hope that they reincarnate properly, I suppose. The most I can do is give them a proper send-off rather than keep them around like this. Turning around, Shiro drank another mana potion before glancing up as a Tier 6 magic circle appeared in the sky. Expanding itself to encompass the entire city, the souls started to disintegrate into motes of light while Shiro gave them a silent prayer. What a waste. Even if it was leftovers, it would still be good to use as fuel rather than the reincarnation cycle. A figure smirked as flames flickered within the room. Its purple eyes stared at a portal before narrowing with an ominous glint. Well, I say this is the perfect time for some bargains. Who knows what I might find this time? Perhaps, in a few days, I might even get my hands on a queen who suffers defeat. The figure grinned before stepping through the portal. Once all of the souls have been dealt with, Shiro deactivated her true spirit nature before turning towards the temple. I suppose we should have a look now, Shiro suggested with a smile. Walking up the steps, the group proceeded to the top of the temple. Usually, this process would be filled with people since the residents here used this temple as a place of worship along with a medium for gaining knowledge. However, there was only deathly silence. While walking up the steps, Shiro couldn't help but think back to the person who claimed the man was his subordinate. What powers did he use for them to die in such a manner? Why did he waste part of their soul? Questions filled her mind, but she had no answers. Despite her knowledge of souls and mastery thanks to Hades' help, she still couldn't think of anything that might be helpful with just taking a part of them. From what she could tell, the part that was missing was memories. Why just take the memories? What about the combat experience? The personality? Why did they only take away the memories, but nothing else? Was there something to gain from the memories? Sighing in frustration, Shiro pulled out the book and started to compare a few of the runes that her drones have scanned around the city. She had made sure that that would be as far as they could so that they could capture the full rune. Looking at the transmitted images, Shiro started to fill in the gaps. It didn't take them long to reach the top, as they could see a giant building decorated with the bare minimum for it to look holy along with a gate that towered over them. Seeing that the gate was already open slightly, they didn't hesitate to take a step into the temple. The interior of the temple was larger on the inside than it was on the outside. Looking at the hall which stretched beyond what should be possible within this temple, Shiro couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. Supported by tens of pillars that connected to the ceiling, Shiro could see statues lined up on either side, guarding the path towards the center of the temple. The statues were of armored giants holding swords and had red capes behind them. Sending out her senses just in case these could attack her, she realized that they were just normal statues, so there wasn't anything to be worried about. Towards the center of the temple was a large altar of sorts. Several staircases led up to the raised platform as a crystal formation could be seen behind it, radiating a myriad of colors due to the glass ceiling above, which allowed sunlight to pass through the crystals. Approaching the altar, they could see a kneeling statue of a knight along with the statue of a god. Scanning through her memories, Shiro couldn't find anything related to this god and figured that it was probably a new god that appeared after the world was integrated with the system. Spotting a silver plate with carvings on the surface, Shiro analyzed the language before opening her mouth. In honor of the greatest knight who served me, I shall bestow knowledge to this hometown, Shiro muttered before glancing back. Welp, I'm not exactly sure where the trials are, so it's up to you now. The book didn't say anything else. Shiro shrugged as Sylvia nodded her head. Stepping into the center of the altar, Sylvia took a deep breath. It's pretty simple. I wouldn't call it a ritual, but rather the act of declaring the intent to do the trials. Sylvia shrugged before flaring her mana. Sylvia, Sage of Life, wishes to attempt the trials of knowledge, she called out as the crystals started to flicker. Suddenly, the lights converged towards her as a portal opened up before her. See you soon. Sylvia glanced back with a smile before stepping through the portal. One by one, the other healer and alchemist started to declare their intent as similar portals opened up for them. Do you want to try it too? Nantion asked as Shiro thought about it for a moment. She wasn't sure how long it'll take, so there was the chance that her mental state might become unstable halfway through the trials. However, she couldn't continue to trouble Nantion like this. I'll give it a go, Shiro said after biting her lip. Taking a deep breath, she took a step forward and glanced up at the crystal. Shiro, nanotech demigoddess, wishes to attempt the trials of knowledge, Shiro called out. Suddenly, golden lights appeared in the crystals as divine energy filled the room. Taking a step back in surprise, Shiro watched as the divine energy converged within the crystals. As a singular, I glanced down at her. A demigoddess. It's already the new age, but it's not the latter half. How peculiar. Regardless, answer me, this young goddess. What knowledge do you seek and what you aim to do with it? A voice rang out as Shiro knew that she was talking to a god, or rather, would have been a god since this was left-over divine energy that is sealed within the crystal. I know that you have medical, druidic, and alchemic knowledge, but since you are a god, do you have knowledge on the runic language that you use? The ones we found in the mist, and the ones that we found hidden within this city. I want to use this knowledge so that I can become stronger to protect the ones that I care about. Shiro answered truthfully, narrowing its eye. The pupils flickered for a moment before calming down. Understood. You are speaking the truth. My knowledge of runes is not as deep as my knowledge of the professions that you speak of, but I will grant you access to the library containing the knowledge of runes. However, before I allow you to enter the library, I want you to make a vow. A vow. Indeed, you are not allowed to use the knowledge that you have gained to intentionally harm innocents. Hearing this, Shiro nodded her head. Shiro, vow to not use the runic knowledge that I would gain to intentionally harm innocents who have a good soul. Shiro vowed as a Tier 8 magic circle appeared around her before shrinking into a single rune on her forehead before disappearing. Good. Take a step forward. The voice said as a portal opened in front of her. Just a question before I go. Who are you? Shiro asked curiously, since more and more unknown gods are appearing now, and she wanted to know where they come from. I am a dead god. There is no need for you to know my name, as this is the only place that contains my divine energy. A dead god. Did you come from a previous garden that failed? Shiro asked with a frown. I did indeed. The god of healing was my title. After the new age ended, everything was destroyed. The native gods were, unfortunately, taken care of. I was no exception. The voice sighed as the divine energy faded away. Sensing that he was gone, Shiro furrowed her brows before glancing back at Nantion. Don't worry, I'll ask for a trial of knowledge as well. Not sure what I'll get though, since I don't have much healing. Nantion chuckled. Good luck. Shiro nodded her head. Hesitating for a moment, she jogged back and grabbed his sleeve. Cough. I spent a moment talking to him, so I need a little reset. Shiro scratched her cheek as Nantion couldn't help but chuckle. Should I perhaps cut a piece of my sleeve off for you? He joked as Shiro rolled her eyes. Seeing the portal flicker, she let go of Nantion's sleeve and stepped through. You have discovered the library of a dead god. This library is an isolated space with all of the god's knowledge contained within. You have 1 day within this library. You are limited to the runic section. Seeing that her time limit was 1 day, Shiro couldn't help but pause for a moment. Turning around, she saw that her exit had been sealed. She could already feel her heart beating, as 1 day was far beyond her current limit. Previously, she was able to stay within Chronos dimension for a long time since her physical body was with Nantion. But now, she was isolated on her own, in a library for a whole day with no knowledge of what could be happening outside. Shaking her head, she dismissed her doubts as she still had a long road to go. It's just 24 hours. It'll go by quickly. I've done research longer than this before. Shiro muttered as she glanced back at the library. There were rows upon rows of books stretching as high as the eye could see, with a single table in the center. Walking towards the desk, books started to fall down from above as they stacked themselves next to the table. A quick glance of the title told her that each of them were the knowledge linked to the runes. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed the closest book and started to read. Reading through the books, Shiro's mind started to wander, not even 10 minutes in, as her surroundings seemed to close in on her. The shadows would seem to flicker as she bit her lip and shook her head, trying to ignore it. However, her surroundings continued to darken as Shiro activated her runes and surrounded herself in a fortress of nanotech. Hugging her knees while using her spare hand to read the book, Shiro hoped that the 24 hours would end soon. Even with the joy of reading books on the runes that the god used, it was still hard to focus when she couldn't concentrate. I should just memorize everything first and read it later when I have time. Shiro thought to herself as she started to flick through the books in an attempt to just remember each page rather than deciphering anything. Once she finished flicking through a book, she would throw it out of her bunker so that it wouldn't take up space. Continuously flipping through the books, Shiro made sure to remember everything she saw. Even the smallest detail had to be remembered in case she discovers a link later that requires these details. #####. Shiro didn't know how long she had been reading for. Each moment felt like it would spread on for an eternity. She had been forcing herself to regulate her breathing as to not hyperventilate while doubts filled her mind. Gritting her teeth, she had an urge to lash out and destroy all of the shadows near her, but she knew that it was most likely just her mind playing with her. Scratching her hair, she tossed the book in her hands away while drinking a mana potion, creating several motes of lights. She looked at the remaining stacks of books. She had an idea, but it was akin to running away from her fears rather than confronting them. But with the way that things are going, she knew she wasn't going to get through all of the books in time. Closing her eyes, Shiro did a hard reset with her main self sealed away for the time being. It couldn't be a soft reset, since there's a high chance of her remembering her trauma again. The only way for her to continue with studying these runes was a hard reset where her only purpose was to read through all of the books and memorize them. She didn't need to think about anything else. A blank slate with a single line carved within her mind. Read and memorize everything here. Opening her eyes once more, they lacked any form of emotion. Unnerving calmness, a puppet of sorts. Waving her hand, she dismissed the fortress and started to read without a single care about her surroundings. She just needed to keep reading. Ignore everything. ####. Waiting by the staircase, Nantion waited without a second word since he wasn't able to get access to the trials. He didn't have any healing magic, nor was he a demigod that could spark the interest of a dead god. Looking at the altar, she couldn't help but wonder how Shiro was holding up. It had long passed 10 minutes, which was her current limit, so he wondered if she was fine. Just the thought of her being alone while trying to withstand her fears caused him to sigh as he glanced at his sleeve and stood up. Walking around the temple, he looked at each of the statues while he waited since he didn't know how long they'll be in there. While he was investigating, mostly out of boredom, he noticed a presence. It was so small that if he wasn't focused on finding anything out of the ordinary, he wouldn't have discovered it. Walking towards the presence, Nantion saw that a small lizard of sorts was now running away at full speed. Furrowing his brows, he noticed that it was familiar. *Pucci. Before it could get far, Nantion had already summoned a light sword and slashed it in half. Not good, he muttered. The familiar had probably long sent the information back to the summoner, so depending on who they are, they might get surrounded soon. Unsure of when the group will return from their trials, Nantion stepped out of the temple and laid a protective barrier around the entire place before standing above the staircase. Taking a deep breath, he checked his inventory for anything he could use and saw that he still had a piece of the runic guardian that Shiro had given him. It was a black-grade item that allowed him to summon a runic guard with the same stats as Shiro and had a defense guaranteed by Hephaestus himself. Just as a precaution, he placed the rune in a pocket so that he could bring it out whenever he wanted. It didn't take long before he could see a group of people approaching from the distance. A single glance caused him to furrow his brows since his enemy was unexpectedly a queen. Naisha LVL 700 Queen of Summons. Around her seemed to be guards around level 650 while cannon fodder averaged around level 300 to 400. What brings you to this empty city, Your Highness? I do believe that we are not acquainted. Nantion called out as he placed his mask over his face. Shiro didn't like others seeing his face after all. Does this city belong to you? I happened to hear some news about trials along with a secondary trial which has the inheritance of a god. Unless you're the owner, this is a free place. Naisha chuckled as she stepped forward. She had long silver blonde hair along with a pair of blue eyes that matched the color of the sky. She wore a white dress that was covered by some light armor. If you don't mind me asking, may I know who you heard the news from? Nantion asked, keeping his guard up in case a surprise attack was launched against him mid-talk. The longer he delayed the better since he wasn't sure he could defeat all of them. Just a helpful fellow. Now why don't you tell me about yourself? Your face is rather desirable after all. Naisha smiled as she licked her lips, but Nantion shook his head. Sorry, but there's only one woman in my heart, and that is not you. Though if you needed comfort in bed, I'm sure one of your summons can help you with that. Nantion laughed, but Naisha only narrowed her eyes. Shame, but you really think a level 530 can stand up to all of us? Not really. I wasn't able to cultivate much for levels since someone needed my help. However, he trailed off as his figure started to warp. Suddenly, he reappeared in front of Naisha and cleaved his sword down. Crack. *T. It's shallow. Nantion clicked his tongue since he wanted to kill her in one go, but her reactions were better than what he had expected. All he managed to achieve was draw a little bit of blood. Seeing his hostility, Naisha didn't hesitate to take a step back as she waved her hand. Suddenly, several Tier 6 magic circles appeared with portals opening above Nantion. Understanding that they were summoned monsters, he decided to take care of the cannon fodder first. Even if they were cannon fodder, it'll still be annoying if he kept on getting hit by them. Slamming his hand down, a Tier 6 magic circle appeared as he teleported away using his control over light. Those that were standing in the magic circle felt danger beneath them, as sword of light shot up through a certain entrance and ripped them in half. The wounds were charred as the smell of cooked meat started to drift through the area, making some distance between him and Naisha so that he didn't get surrounded. Nantian was about to summon the guard when a trident appeared in his peripherals. Ducking down as fast as he could, he barely avoided being stabbed in the head, but the attacker wasn't done. Stomping down, Nantian's body tensed up uncontrollably as the attacker slammed his palm against his chest. Coughing up a mouthful of blood from the impact, his body was launched towards the portals as several elemental attacks were launched towards him. Gritting his teeth, he twisted his body in mid-air as tens of swords were summoned besides him. Biting his finger, he traced a line of blood down his arm as his sleeves burned away to reveal a row of glowing runes that seemed to be formed from the sun. The light distorted from the heat as Nantian aimed his palm towards the summoned monsters. Without a second word, he swiped his hands down as the sword shot towards them, pinning them in place. In the next moment, a pillar of light descended from the sky and obliterated everything in front of him. Hovering in the air, Nantian held his sword while quickly giving himself some healing front. That single hit he took from the guard. Well, this is certainly unfair, wouldn't you say? Many versus 1. Nantian forced a smile as Naisha only narrowed her eyes before commanding everyone to charge towards him. Dodging most of their attacks while killing off the small fries, Nantian didn't know how long it had been, but his muscles ached from fatigue. There were now only 5 people left, with one of them being Naisha. Judging by her expression, he knew that she was completely furious since a low-leveled Tier 6 managed to avoid their pursuit and kill off the people she had with her. He hadn't been able to use any items just yet since the moment he tried to. They'll take that moment to attack him, so it was a risk. Glancing down at his mana, he couldn't help but sigh since he was running empty. Unless he takes a mana potion, he won't be able to fight for long. I'll admit, you're tenacious. Naisha glared as Nantian chuckled. His mask was half broken so they could see one of his eyes. Thank you very much, but I have to attribute it to the fact that you have been taking it easy on me. Nantian smiled since he knew that they haven't been using their main skills yet. For a queen of summoning, most of the monsters she's been summoning had been small fries, so he knew that she had something up her sleeve. The fact that he couldn't sense it worried him. Perhaps. Naisha smiled as she gave her followers a glance and snapped her fingers. Suddenly, the 4 of them disappeared and reappeared near him. Wanting to not get surrounded, Nantian was about to take a step back when one of the guards slammed his knuckles together. Feeling the desire to attack him, Nantian clicked his tongue and knew that it was a taunt skill. Biting the tip of his tongue, he woke himself up in time to duck down and raise his sword to be used as a shield to block their attacks. Taking this moment to roll to the side while activating the runic guard, he watched as a summoning hex appeared on the floor as a giant stone hand appeared. Bang, slamming the ground near the attackers and forcing them to step back. The runic guardian clawed his way out of the hex and stood menacingly tall. It was mostly constructed of carved stone that had runes etched to the surface. It was 15 foot tall with large burly arms that reached past its knees. Before anyone could react, the runic guard disappeared and appeared near Naisha and punched towards her. Widening her eyes, Naisha summoned a monster that coiled its body around her, but the punch shattered the monster's scales and broke its bones, sending the 2 of them rocketing towards the empty city. I almost forgot that Shiro's strength was crazy for a mage too. Last time I asked, she had 302 million points in strength, but that was before the first event. Nantian muttered with a smile as he quickly drank a potion. Unfortunately, despite the runic guard having the same stats as Shiro, it wasn't able to use any spells nor did it have any ranged attacks. It was just a powerful distraction. However, with Nantian's mana back to full, they were a team of attack and defense. 2 of the attacks were now keeping the guard busy while the other 2 were pushing him back, leaving Naisha to do whatever she wanted. Standing up from the corpse of her most recent summon, her expression did not look good as her eyes were filled with wrath. Clasping her hands together, a giant Tier 6 magic circle appeared in the sky as it overshadowed the city. Looking up in shock, Nantion wanted to interfere with the summoning, but with two Tier 6 guards trying to stop him, it was a little difficult. He was barely managing to hold his own, but he wasn't able to find a chance to escape, so he could only watch as a dreadful presence slowly descended towards the city. Little by little, the summon revealed itself. It had a long serpentine body which was most likely twice, perhaps even 3 times longer than the city when stretched out. Crystalline scales decorated the surface as there were neon blue lights peeking out from the gaps. 2 muscular claws with what seemed to be retractable razors tore open the portal, revealing its full body. With a draconic head that seemed translucent, revealing its skull, the summon also had a pair of crystal wings where the membrane that helps it fly stretched all the way down its serpentine body. Looking at the wingspan of this summoning that dwarfed the city, Nantion couldn't help but shake his head. Of course, this didn't mean that he was giving up. Let's keep fighting, I suppose. He chuckled, grabbing the blade with his bare hands. Nantion broke the first attacker's guard before flipping over him to avoid the second attacker. Slamming the two into one another, Nantion slammed his hands together and activated a Tier 6 magic circle above the two. Suddenly, a barrier surrounded them as a tiny orb of light appeared in the center. Snapping his fingers, it exploded with all of its energy contained within the barrier, cooking the two alive. Before the spell could finish, he watched as cracks formed on the barrier. Asterisk ping. Shattering to pieces, Nantion quickly dodged the two's attack as their eyes glared at him with anger. Seeing both of them being burned badly, but not fatal, Nantion couldn't help but sigh. Of course it's not this easy. He sighed before activating a berserk skill. I think I'll take a page out of her book. I wonder what stacking berserk skills feel like. Nantion smiled before charging at the two, while keeping an eye on the summon that loomed above them. Seeing that the two reacted with attacks of their own, Nantion smiled and allowed them to hit his body. Surprised at his willingness to take hits, the two were about to react when Nantion grabbed their weapons and pulled them closer. Reaching for their heads, he slammed the two against one another, dazing them for a moment before slamming them against the ground. Grabbing one of them to pin the other down, a spear of light formed in his hand as he was about to pierce the two of them when he sensed danger from above and quickly rolled out of the way. Asterisk, boom. Watching a breath attack obliterate the two guards along with the ground that they were laying on, Nantion raised his eyebrow. However, before he could question his decision, he watched as 2 more portals opened up, summoning 2 extra Tier 6 guards, causing him to massage his eyes. No wonder they were lacking a few skills, he muttered, but just the fact that she could summon Tier 6 guards was annoying, even if it seems like she was limited to just 4. The guards will keep spawning, so my best bet is to take care of the summoner along with the dragon thing above us. Nantion thought to himself, while glancing towards Naisha, who was standing above the head of the summon. With her being protected by the dragon, it was going to be a pain to reach her unless he managed to stun the dragon. Even then, there was no guarantee that he would be able to kill her. The runic guard was taking care of the other two, so he wasn't being swarmed by all of her summons. Taking a deep breath, Nantion flared his aura as there was a time limit for his berserk skills. Activating the skill unique to his class, Incarnation of Light, radiant armor wrapped around Nantion as golden spears appeared around him. Looking up, he raised his hand before pulling back as if ready to throw a javelin. Light started to gather towards his hands as Tier 6 magic circles appeared in front of him. The most up-to-date novels are published on lightnovelworld.com. Forming a rotating spear with the light, Nantion gritted his teeth as the ground started to crack beneath him. While this was happening, the 2 newly summoned guards were dashing towards him. Ignoring them, he threw the spear. Asterisk, boom. The moment the spear passed through the magic circles, their power was amplified as it transformed into a blinding ray of light that passed by the dragon in an instant. Yura! Hearing the dragon cry out in pain and anger, Naisha stabilized herself on its back as she could see a line of burned flesh along the body, with the scales being torn off forcefully, and the ones that weren't torn off were being melted by the heat. Don't look away. Nantion's voice rang out as he appeared in front of the dragon's head with another spear ready. Narrowing his eyes, he threw the spear. Standing on top of the now dead summon, Nantion panted heavily as blood dripped off his arm. The runic guardian was destroyed during the battle, and the dragon was much harder to kill than he had expected. Looking at the destruction caused to the city with giant scales destroying the house, he couldn't help but sigh as he summoned another spear. Taking steps towards Naisha, who was panicking, Nantion tried to focus his gaze towards her, but his vision continued to blur. During the entire fight, she continued to summon Tier 6 guards along with other monsters to keep him occupied while the dragon damaged him, so it was no surprise that she would have run out of mana by now. He was in the same position. Had it not been for the mana potions that he continued to drink, he would have died long ago. Pulling his arm back, he grabbed his final spear and threw it towards the queen. Asterisk, bang. T. Nantion thought to himself with a frown as he missed the throw. Seeing Naisha pulling out a talisman, Nantion wanted to stop her, but his body gave up, forcing him to fall forwards. Watching Naisha leave through a portal that the talisman opened, Nantion couldn't help but curse his luck. I can't pass out yet. He thought to himself, even if Naisha had left, there's no guarantee that she won't just return the moment lost consciousness. Rolling his body over, he forced himself to look up at the sky and glance towards his level. Seems like I made up for not cultivating these last months, he muttered with a soft chuckle. During this fight, he had killed a level 700 summon, tens of Tier 6 guards, and even a bunch of small fries that came with the queen. Nantion, LVL 630 Incarnation of Light. Even after his body was being wrecked by the backlash, he activated more berserk talismans to keep himself fighting, and it was worth it since the queen had now left. Gritting his teeth, he could feel his body ache from the backlash as he took a deep breath and forced himself to stand back up. Using his sword as a crutch, he made his way towards the temple once more and sat by the staircase leading up to the altar. Closing his eyes, he rested his body while he could. ####. Shiro didn't know how long she had been reading for, but the pile of books started to decrease. The moment she had finished the last book, her seal undid itself as she looked around in confusion before remembering where she was. How long has it been? Shiro muttered as she quickly stood up. Glancing down at her phone, she saw that there were only 2 hours left and sighed in relief. The moment she did, she felt as though someone had just breathed near her and quickly turned around to see the empty library. Biting her lip, she found a good place to sit down before surrounding herself with walls and sealed up the top. I just need to stay here for 2 hours, she thought to herself while hugging her knees. Boxing herself in a corner, she started to recount the books that she had memorized and tried to piece things together. Time seemed to stretch on forever as she mostly spent that time trying not to think about things rather than piece together the information. Thankfully, this didn't last long as Shiro sensed the mana gathering towards one point and a portal was opened. Widening her eyes, she quickly dismissed the walls around her and rushed towards the portal without looking back. Shielding her eyes from the light, Shiro found herself back at the temple. Looking around for Nantion, she was shocked to see him resting on the steps with Sylvia and other healers tending to his wounds. What happened? Shiro asked in surprise as she quickly rushed over. Shoo. Sylvia gestured for her to be quiet as Shiro nodded her head. Seeing that Nantion was currently sleeping, Shiro looked towards Sylvia hoping for some answers. Come with me, I'll tell you. He's finally resting, so we shouldn't wake him up. Standing up, Sylvia gestured for Shiro to follow her as the two left the temple. Looking at the destruction of the city with the giant corpse of a draconic monster slowly evaporating into mana, Shiro couldn't help but widen her eyes in shock. Our trial was finished in 5 hours. By the time we came out, we saw Nantion barely holding on near the steps. His body was in a worse shape than yours since, unlike you, he didn't have the monstrous regeneration that you had. According to him, a queen had sent a scout earlier and launched an attack on the temple, but he managed to repel it. He wasn't able to kill the Queen of Summoning, but most of her summons were killed. He isn't sure if they could be summoned again, though, Sylvia explained with a frown as Shiro paused in shock. She knew that queens were probably going to investigate this country, but she didn't expect to see one on the first day. How is his condition? Shiro asked, glancing back in worry. It's not great. Backlash from stacking berserk skills. Sylvia sighed. If I didn't learn how to treat backlashes from the trial, he would be looking much worse. Hearing this, Shiro furrowed her brows as she made her way back into the temple. Walking up the steps, she sat next to Nantion while holding onto his sleeve. Checking his body condition to see if there was anything she could do, Shiro sighed softly. Once her mental state had stabilized, Shiro looked down at Nantion before turning towards Sylvia. I'll be right back. Nodding her head, Sylvia watched as Shiro made her way out of the temple with a cold expression. That queen's probably no, she is dead, Sylvia thought to herself as she focused on treating Nantion's injuries. ###. Reaching the corpse of the dragon, Shiro drank a mana potion as nanobots appeared around her, getting them to consume the corpse. Shiro had parts of her mind analyze the runes she learned within the library, while the other used her knowledge to construct a spell that could track the link connecting the summoner and the summon. Slowly, a Tier 6 magic circle appeared on her hand as a red tether slowly materialized. There, Shiro narrowed her eyes. She had around 10 minutes to deal with this queen, and it was more than enough. Even 5 minutes would be enough right now. Stomping down, her figure disappeared as she flickered through dimensions to increase her speed. Using a mix of special magic along with rift magic, Shiro charged towards the other end of the tether. ###SH*T. Naisha gritted her teeth as she sat down in a safe house that they had prepared beforehand. She didn't take everyone with her since there was only one person there, but she didn't think he would be able to kill her strongest summon. It was one of her rewards when she cleared a hidden trial, and it was also her trump card for this event. She wanted to launch another attack, but she was suffering from having her blood link destroyed with her summon, so she was in no state to fight. However, once she recovers, she'll have everyone here attack the temple. He'll be suffering from the berserk skill backlash. Hell, there's probably a chance that he's already dead, but we have 5 high-level Tier 6 guards. They only have that man and the queen, so we win in terms of numbers. Naisha thought to herself while resting on a bed. However, the moment she looked down, she noticed a faint red tether appear on her wrist as a bad feeling appeared in her heart. Just as she went to touch the tether, it disintegrated into tiny light particles. Understanding that this was a skill, Naisha immediately wanted to leave this place. But before she could even sit up properly, wires wrapped around her body, pinning her to the bed. Why the rush? A cold voice rang out as Naisha forced herself to look up and saw Shiro crouching above her bed frame with a dark expression. Looking at the eyes that glowed slightly in the shadow cast by her hair, Naisha could feel her body tense up. Flexing her finger, a needle appeared as it stabbed into Naisha's shoulder. She wanted to cry out, but a rune appeared on her throat, stopping her from speaking. This one stops you from speaking and moving. It's a neat little combination I came up with using parts of the new runes I discovered, Shiro explained as a second needle appeared. This one takes some time to use, but once it completes its task, your mana realm will be destroyed. Every step of the way, you'll feel excruciating pain as it's shredding all of your links little by little. Throwing the second needle and stabbing it into Naisha's abdominal area, Shiro hopped off the bed frame and stood next to the bed. And this one messes with your perception of time. Shiro grinned darkly as a third needle appeared. Stabbing it into her chest, Shiro brought out a dagger and grabbed Naisha by her hair. Enjoy the next year of my company. *Poochie.